You'll never let addiction win again after this. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Carl Jung's words cut straight to the heart of addiction. In today's video from Spiritual Wisdom, we'll uncover the mindset shift that takes away addiction's power, not by sheer force, but by courageously turning inward and meeting the parts of ourselves we've been running from. This is not just about breaking a habit. It's about reclaiming your freedom and your wholeness. As you watch, think about this. What truth about yourself have you been avoiding? And what would happen if you faced it today? Share your reflections in the comments. Your story could be the lifeline someone else needs. 1. Addiction is not just about substances or habits. It's a symptom of deeper, unacknowledged inner pain. Addiction is not merely about a substance or a repeated habit. It is the symptom of a far deeper, often unacknowledged wound that lives within the hidden corridors of the soul. Carl Jung saw addiction not as a flaw of character, but as the shadow's disguise, a clever mask the mind wears to avoid confronting the rejected, wounded, or concealed parts of the self. The shadow is not evil by nature. It is the repository for all the experiences, emotions, and desires that we have pushed away because we could not, or would not, face them. Within it lie the childhood traumas we never spoke of, the grief we tried to bury, the shame we hoped no one would ever see, and the longings we labeled unacceptable. Over time, these hidden fragments do not disappear. They simply shape our behavior from behind the scenes, pulling strings we don't even know are there. Jung once observed, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." This avoidance is not weakness, nor is it laziness. It is a survival mechanism, formed in moments when the truth felt too heavy to bear. But what once helped us survive eventually becomes the very prison that keeps us from living. Addiction, in any form, whether to alcohol, work, food, gambling, toxic relationships, or even constant distraction, serves as the mask that allows us to keep turning away from the mirror of the soul. And here's the paradox. When we try to fight addiction with sheer willpower, we often find ourselves losing. We may quit one habit only to replace it with another, stop one behavior only to develop a different compulsion. The surface changes, but the wound beneath remains untouched, calling out for recognition in another form. Jung understood that true freedom from addiction does not come from crushing the shadow into silence, but from integrating it into our conscious life. The shadow must be brought into the light, not to be destroyed, but to be understood, accepted, and reintegrated into the whole of who we are. This is not a comfortable process. It requires the courage to sit in the raw presence of our pain, to acknowledge what we have avoided, and to give voice to the truths we have long kept silent. It means meeting our shame with compassion rather than condemnation, and allowing ourselves to feel what we once numbed at all costs. In doing so, we reclaim the exiled pieces of our soul, not because we were broken, but because those pieces were left behind in our desperate attempts to survive. The shift that makes addiction powerless is not a moment of brute strength, but a moment of radical understanding. Addiction is no longer seen as an enemy to defeat, but as a messenger bearing news from the deepest part of ourselves. The very thing we thought was destroying us becomes the signpost pointing toward what needs healing. When we stop waging war against the symptom and start listening to the message, the compulsion begins to lose its grip. We no longer need it to numb or distract us because we have turned to face the source of our pain directly. In that confrontation, we find that the pain holds within it a hidden wisdom. And when we honor that wisdom, our soul begins to heal in ways that no quick fix, no temporary relief could ever offer. If you're ready to face your shadow and begin healing the pain beneath addiction, comment below. I choose to heal, to take the first step toward true freedom. 2. Cravings are messengers, not enemies. Cravings are not your enemy. They are messengers from the deepest parts of you, carrying truths your conscious mind has tried to bury. Carl Jung, the brilliant Swiss psychiatrist whose work still shapes how we understand the soul, once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." That is exactly what happens when we fight cravings with nothing but willpower, trying to crush them without asking the one question that truly matters. What are you trying to tell me? Every craving, whether it's for sugar, alcohol, a cigarette, a toxic relationship, or hours lost in endless scrolling, is not simply about the object of desire. It's a signal, a flare from your inner world pointing towards something far more important. Loneliness you haven't voiced, fears you've been avoiding, needs you've been denying, or wounds you've never fully healed. In the modern world, we're conditioned to see cravings as weaknesses to conquer. We are told to distract ourselves, suppress them, or drown them in discipline. But what if they are not weaknesses at all? What if they are invitations that open doors into a deeper understanding of yourself? Think about someone who comes home every night after long, exhausting hours of work and feels an almost irresistible pull toward pouring a drink. On the surface, it looks like poor self-control. But if they stop and truly listen, they might discover that the craving is not for alcohol. It's for connection, for warmth, for a life that feels alive. It's the aching reminder that the silence of an empty home is not what their soul longs for. And if they answer that deeper need by finding community, rekindling old passions, or creating a sense of meaning, the craving begins to fade, not because they forced it away, but because its message has been heard. Carl Jung's teachings show us that the unconscious mind always finds a way to speak, and cravings are one of its clearest languages. Every urge is like a persistent knock at the door of your awareness. Ignore it, and it grows louder. Slam the door, and it pounds harder. But open it, and you may find that what you feared was a destructive force is actually a guide pointing you toward the healing you've been searching for. Yet in today's culture, we have mastered the art of drowning these signals. We binge watch shows to escape, scroll through social media to numb, shop to fill a void, or overwork to avoid stillness. All of these are disguises for the same truth your soul is trying to speak to you, but you've been too busy to listen. The shift happens when you stop seeing cravings as battles to win and start seeing them as conversations to have. You don't need to fight them. You need to sit with them. You need to ask, what is this feeling really about? Sometimes the answer will surprise you. It might be grief. It might be unexpressed anger. It might be the longing to be seen, loved, and understood. And once you address that core wound, the craving no longer needs to shout. The truth is, addiction begins to lose its power over you, not when you overpower it, but when you understand it. The real struggle is not against the craving itself, but against the disconnection from your own truth. When the next urge rises, don't rush to suppress it. Pause. Breathe. Let it speak. Because the craving that once felt like chains holding you down might actually be the key to unlocking the very door you've been afraid to open. In the quiet space of listening without judgment, you'll find that every craving you've ever had was never about weakness. It was about the soul's attempt to bring you home to yourself. 3. Willpower alone fails because it exhausts you. Willpower alone fails because it drains the very life out of you, leaving you exhausted, frustrated, and trapped in the same cycle you swore you'd escape. You push and push, believing that sheer force will be enough, but it's like trying to hold back the ocean with your bare hands. The waves will always return. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is why real change is never born from willpower alone. It is born from awareness. It begins the moment you stop fighting blindly and start paying attention. The moment you pause when the craving comes, look it in the eye, and name it. You begin to ask the deeper questions. What is this craving trying to tell me? What wound is it hiding? What emptiness is it trying to fill? And in that stillness, the craving is no longer just a force pulling you into darkness. It becomes a messenger from the depths of your soul, pointing you towards something within that has been left unattended for far too long. Jung understood that addiction is not merely a mental or physical weakness. It is, at its core, a spiritual crisis. It is the soul's desperate cry to reconnect with something sacred that has been lost. When you rely only on willpower, you're standing at the edge of a river trying to block the current without ever exploring where the water comes from. Awareness, however, invites you to walk upstream, to find the hidden spring, to understand why the waters flow the way they do. It allows you to notice the subtle triggers, the loneliness that creeps in late at night, the boredom that numbs your mind, the unresolved pain that whispers in moments of stillness. And instead of letting these moments control you, you meet them with compassion and curiosity. In doing so, you take back the power you thought you had lost. In everyday life, you can see this truth in the way habits hold people hostage. Whether it's the constant pull towards cigarettes, the compulsion to overeat, the mindless hours lost to scrolling on your phone, or the repeated return to a toxic relationship, the pattern is the same. Sheer will can hold it off for a while, but eventually the craving wins. That's because the habit is never the true problem. It's the visible symptom of something hidden. As Eckhart Tolle wisely said, what you resist persists. The more you treat the craving as an enemy, the more it thrives in the shadows, waiting for the moment your defenses weaken. But when you turn toward it with awareness, when you stop running and start listening, you strip it of its power because it can no longer hide from you. The true shift that makes addiction powerless is not about tightening your grip. It's about loosening it in the right way. It's about stepping into the role of a conscious observer of your own mind and spirit, tracing the roots of your patterns and unraveling them with patience. It's the willingness to feel discomfort without being consumed by it, to sit in the presence of the craving and say, "I see you, I hear you, I know what you're trying to tell me, and I will tend to that truth." This is the essence of spiritual mastery, not the absence of temptation, but the presence of deep, unwavering awareness. And in that awareness, the craving dissolves, not because you crushed it, but because you understood it. Once it is brought into the light, it no longer has a place to hide, and you are finally free, not by force, but by truth. If this perspective resonates with you, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep uncovering the deeper truth about lasting change together. 4. Facing the shadow transforms it. Suppressing an urge is like trying to hold back a tide with your bare hands. The more you fight it, the more force it gathers. Carl Jung understood that this resistance does not dissolve the craving. It strengthens it, feeding it with the very energy of your denial. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And in that truth lies the key to transformation." Addiction is not just a behavior or a bad habit. It is a signal from the soul, a manifestation of an unacknowledged shadow calling out to be seen. When you meet that shadow with attention, honesty, and curiosity instead of fear or shame, its grip weakens, and the healing process begins. The shadow thrives in secrecy, and when we hide from it, it grows in the dark like roots spreading underground, unseen but powerful. By bringing it into the light, we rob it of that hidden strength. This does not mean indulging every impulse, but rather observing it without judgment, asking what message it holds. Often, the craving itself is not for the substance, the behavior, or the distraction, but for the comfort, relief, or escape it symbolizes. Someone who pours another drink may actually be reaching for peace after a day of silent emotional battles, just as someone who loses themselves in endless scrolling may be seeking connection they cannot find in the real world. When you pause and acknowledge the craving, saying, "I see you. I understand why you're here," you stop waging war against yourself and begin a conversation with the deeper truth your soul has been trying to express. Facing the shadow is an act of compassion, not condemnation. It is choosing to treat the wounded parts of yourself not as enemies to be eradicated, but as children needing guidance. Each urge becomes an invitation to uncover the unmet needs, unresolved grief, or suppressed desires hiding beneath the surface. In this way, the shadow ceases to be an obstacle and becomes a guide. You realize that darkness is not the opposite of light, but its partner in creating wholeness. The addiction loses its power, not because it vanishes instantly, but because it no longer controls the choices you make. You integrate the lesson it carried, and in doing so, restore balance between the conscious mind and the hidden layers of your being. Over time, the inner struggle fades. What once felt like an overpowering force becomes just another wave in the ocean of your awareness, noticed, understood, and allowed to pass without pulling you under. This is the transformation Jung spoke of, the moment when the unconscious no longer directs your life in secret. By facing the shadow, you reclaim authorship of your own fate, living not in reaction to your hidden fears, but in harmony with the full truth of who you are. And in that harmony, the soul is free, and addiction has no hold. 5. Use the energy of craving for transformation. Carl Jung once said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And when it comes to addiction, this truth reveals a powerful key to freedom. Every craving you feel, whether for a cigarette, A drink, unhealthy food, or the endless pull of your phone is not just a meaningless impulse. It is a surge of pure, raw energy waiting to be claimed. The real problem is not the craving itself, but the pattern you've been conditioned to follow. The automatic path that channels that energy into the same destructive habits over and over again. But cravings can be transformed. The energy they hold can be redirected into new, soul-nourishing rituals. Writing down your thoughts, moving your body, breathing deeply, or engaging in self-reflection that brings clarity instead of chaos. In a world that offers instant gratification at every turn, it's no wonder so many people feel powerless against their urges. Yet within every moment of desire lies a hidden opportunity for transformation. The restlessness that pushes you toward unhealthy choices can become the same fire that fuels your growth. The urge to binge on junk food can power an intense workout. The impulse to get lost in endless scrolling can drive you to finally begin a creative project you've been postponing for years. It's not about killing the craving. It's about giving it a new purpose. I once knew a man who battled alcohol for over 2 decades. Each evening, like clockwork, he felt the familiar pull that used to lead him straight to the bar. But instead of giving in, he began walking to a nearby park, breathing in the fresh air and listening to music that lifted his spirit. At first, the cravings grew louder, almost angry that he was ignoring them. But with each redirection, something shifted. He began to see that alcohol had never been the true need. It was connection, movement, and a sense of being alive that his soul was hungry for. Over time, the same energy that once drove his addiction became the energy that rebuilt his life. Every craving is a crossroad. One path takes you back to temporary relief, followed by the same emptiness. The other path leads to conscious transformation, where the energy that once chained you becomes the force that sets you free. Instead of asking, "How do I stop wanting this?" ask, "What can I create with this energy?" That question changes everything. It may lead you to write a song, dance in your kitchen, call someone you love, pray, meditate, paint, or simply breathe until the urge softens into peace. Your cravings are not your enemies. They are messengers, pointing you toward the places where your spirit longs for more. When you learn to feed that hunger with purpose, creativity, and presence, you discover a kind of freedom that no temporary fix could ever give you. If this message resonates with you, comment, "I'm transforming," below, and let us know how you're turning your cravings into growth. Your voice inspires others on the same journey. 6. Individuation is the ultimate goal. Individuation is the ultimate goal. And in the deepest spiritual sense, it is the sacred journey of becoming the truest version of yourself, a self that is whole, integrated, and unafraid of its own depths. Recovery is not merely quitting a habit or resisting temptation. It is the profound act of gathering all the scattered pieces of your being, the light you proudly show, and the shadows you've tried to bury, and uniting them in harmony. As Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Addiction is rarely about the substance or behavior itself. It is a symptom of something far more hidden. Unresolved wounds, unmet needs, and parts of the soul that have been exiled. You may believe you're craving a drink, a cigarette, or a screen, but what you are truly craving is connection, safety, and the relief of being at home within yourself. When you only focus on stopping the behavior, you may remove the symptom, but the emptiness still lingers, waiting to manifest in another form. True recovery demands courage, the courage to turn toward the pain you've avoided, to listen to the voice in the shadows, and to invite it into the light. Jung also reminded us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And yet, the moment you choose to face your soul, instead of running from it, the chains of addiction begin to loosen. This is not about exhausting yourself in an endless battle of willpower. It is about dissolving the very conditions that gave your cravings their power. In this process, something extraordinary begins to grow in self-trust. You discover that you can sit with discomfort and not be destroyed by it, that you can allow grief, anger, and longing to move through you without drowning in them, and that you can choose actions that honor your highest self rather than being ruled by impulse. Every moment of weakness becomes a mirror, showing you where you are still divided, and every step toward awareness strengthens the bridge between your conscious mind and the deeper truth of your soul. This is where recovery transforms from an act of survival into a work of spiritual art, turning pain into wisdom, fear into courage, and fragmentation into wholeness. When you reach this place, addiction no longer holds you because you no longer need it. Life itself becomes full enough, rich enough, and meaningful enough to be lived without escape. 7. Lasting change comes through small, consistent acts of self-awareness. Lasting change does not come from sudden bursts of willpower or dramatic promises made in moments of desperation. It grows quietly through small, consistent acts of self-awareness that accumulate over time, reshaping not only your habits, but also the very fabric of your soul. Carl Jung's timeless insight, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, reveals the essence of this transformation. The real victory over addiction begins when you stop wearing the identity of the addict, like an unshakable shadow, and start embracing the role of the conscious chooser. This shift is not merely about resisting the drink, the cigarette, the pill, or the late-night scroll on your phone. It is about creating a new relationship with yourself, one built on compassion, awareness, and trust. At first, these moments of awareness may seem small and almost fragile, like a single candle in a dark room. But every pause before an impulse, every deep breath taken instead of reacting, every moment spent listening to the feeling behind the craving becomes a quiet rebellion against the old self that once lived on autopilot. With each conscious choice, you send a message to the deepest parts of your being that you are no longer a slave to old patterns. You are an active participant in your own freedom. This is not a quick or linear process. Some days you may stumble, but even in those moments, awareness is still at work, teaching you, guiding you, and reshaping your inner landscape. Over time, these repeated choices form a new rhythm of life, where your decisions are no longer dictated by compulsion, but by clarity. You begin to feel a quiet strength rising from within, the kind of strength that does not need to announce itself because it is rooted in truth. The old label of addict fades, not because you have erased your past, but because you have rewritten your present, and in doing so, you have claimed a future that belongs entirely to you. Each day becomes a subtle act of devotion to your own soul, an ongoing conversation between who you once were and who you are becoming. You start to notice that the cravings lose their sharp edge, not because they have disappeared entirely, but because they no longer define you. Your power lies not in fighting against the addiction with clenched fists, but in walking a new path with open eyes, making small, deliberate choices that accumulate into an unshakable way of being. And one day, without even realizing it, you will look back and see that the war you thought you were fighting has ended not with a single, dramatic victory, but with countless small acts of courage that turned struggle into strength and turned a wounded soul into a free one. If this speaks to your soul and you're ready to embody it, repeat after me. I choose awareness every day. I am no longer defined by my past. I am the conscious creator of my life. 8. Freedom is a daily practice. Freedom is a daily choice you make in the smallest and often most overlooked moments of your life. And it is in these moments that the battle against addiction is truly won. Each time a craving rises a pull toward the drink, the cigarette, the endless scrolling, or whatever form your escape takes, you are standing at a crossroads. One road leads to the familiar cycle that has kept you trapped for years, and the other is the path of reclaiming your life. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." An addiction thrives in that avoidance, feeding on the refusal to sit with discomfort, to confront pain, and to face what lies deep within. But the moment you meet a craving, not with judgment or shame, but with curiosity and compassion, you change the entire dynamic. You no longer run from the urge. You lean into it and ask, "What are you here to teach me?" In that question lies your true power, not in gritting your teeth to resist, but in listening closely to what your soul has been trying to tell you all along. Think of the times you've been pulled into the trap of temptation after a long, exhausting day. A boss's harsh words, a fight with a loved one, or a crushing wave of loneliness, and all you wanted was to lose yourself in hours of television, food, or a numbing drink. In the past, the escape came almost automatically, disguised as self-care. But what if you paused instead? What if you asked yourself, what am I really craving right now? You might find it's not the drink you need, but the release of stress. Not the food you hunger for, but the comfort of connection. Not the distraction you seek, but the relief of being truly seen. I once heard the story of a man who had wrestled with alcohol for over 20 years. His breakthrough wasn't the day he promised never to drink again. It was the day he allowed himself to sit quietly with the craving and realized it wasn't about alcohol at all. It was about a desperate need for peace, for stillness, for a way to silence the constant noise in his mind. From that day, he began to find healthier ways to give himself those things, and the craving slowly began to lose its hold on him. Carl Jung saw addiction not as a moral failing, but as a symptom, a signal from deep within that something is out of balance and calling for your attention. This understanding shifts the fight entirely. You stop battling the craving as if it's an enemy to be defeated, and instead treat it as a messenger delivering urgent truth about your inner world. Meeting it with compassion, you begin to ask the right questions. Where am I hurting? What am I avoiding? What need am I not honoring? Over time, every encounter with a craving becomes an opportunity to heal. You start to notice that by choosing to stay present rather than escape, you are building strength, not just mental strength, but spiritual strength. You are proving to yourself over and over again that you are not powerless, that you are not broken, and that you no longer need to numb your reality to survive it. The truth is that freedom isn't won in a single dramatic gesture. It is built brick by brick through countless quiet victories. Every time you pause instead of reacting, every time you choose to feel instead of flee, you are rewriting your story. You are breaking generational patterns, healing wounds you may not have even known you carried, and transforming your life into something far more expansive than the craving ever promised. And though the craving may still visit you from time to time, it will no longer rule you. To affirm your dedication to living in freedom each day, declare it now. Comment below. I choose freedom to honor your journey and inspire others to meet their cravings with courage and compassion. And so, the real victory over addiction begins not with force, but with awareness by turning inward, meeting the parts of yourself you've been running from, and transforming them into allies rather than enemies. As Carl Jung taught us, what you resist not only persists, it grows stronger. But when you shift your mindset, when you embrace the message your soul is sending you, the grip of addiction loses its power. If this insight spoke to your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos that could change the way you see yourself and the world. Uncovering the Mother Wound, a soul-level healing journey. The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. This old saying reminds us just how profoundly a mother's influence shapes our soul. But what happens when that influence leaves behind more wounds than warmth? On Spiritual Wisdom, today's video dives deep into the emotional and spiritual terrain of the mother wound, a hidden imprint that silently affects our relationships, self-worth, and inner peace. Drawing on Carl Jung's timeless insights, we invite you to explore how this wound is not just personal, but ancestral and collective, and more importantly, how it can be healed. As you watch, ask yourself, have I truly faced the parts of me shaped by unmet needs and silent pain? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Your story may help someone else begin their healing too. Let's begin this journey of soul-level transformation together. 1. The mother wound is real and often invisible. Society paints motherhood as the ultimate expression of unconditional love, warmth, and nurturing. But beneath that romanticized image lies a truth many carry in silence: the mother's wound. It's a deep, often invisible imprint left on the soul when maternal love is inconsistent, manipulative, rejecting, or entirely absent. Whether the wound was born from overt trauma, like emotional coldness or abandonment, or from covert control masked as care, its effects are profound. It shapes how you see yourself, how safe you feel being emotionally vulnerable, and how you navigate intimacy and self-worth. You may have learned early on that love had to be earned, that your feelings were too much, or that your needs were inconvenient. As a result, you adapted. You became the pleaser, the perfectionist, the fixer, the one who sacrificed authenticity for approval. But that survival strategy came at a cost, a fractured connection to your true self, and a soul still waiting to feel safe enough to exist without apology. The mother wound is not just a memory from childhood. It's alive in adulthood in the form of people-pleasing, boundary issues, burnout, or relationships that mirror emotional instability. It hides behind your high-achieving, your self-doubt, your tendency to shrink so others feel comfortable. And yet, this wound often goes unspoken, buried under guilt, especially in a culture that deifies mothers and shames any narrative that contradicts that ideal. But healing begins when you stop defending the pain and start naming it. This is not about blame, it's about the truth. It's about validating the part of your soul that never felt fully seen or cherished. Carl Jung reminds us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so, we must become conscious of how this wound has shaped our identity, our beliefs about love, and our relationship to power and worth. Healing the mother's wound doesn't mean cutting ties or holding grudges. It means reclaiming the emotional real estate that has long been occupied by fear, guilt, or unmet expectations. It means learning to mother yourself to meet your own emotional needs with gentleness, with clarity, and with compassion. It means allowing your soul to grieve the love it didn't receive, and then choosing, over and over, to give yourself the love that was missing. And as you do, the old patterns begin to dissolve. You no longer need to chase validation. You no longer confuse control for care. You begin to feel safe in your truth and whole in your presence. This is the quiet revolution of soul healing. It's invisible on the outside, but internally, it changes everything. If you've ever faced the silent pain of a complicated mother-child relationship, we invite you to share your story in the comments. It could help someone feel less alone. And if you're just beginning to explore this healing journey, comment, "I'm ready to heal," so we can walk this path together, one soul at a time. 2. The pain is internalized and passed on. When a child grows up without feeling fully seen, safe, or unconditionally loved by the one person who was meant to offer those things, the wound left behind is not just emotional, it's soul deep. Carl Jung's insight that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, speaks directly to this truth. The mother's wound isn't always visible. It doesn't always come from overt abuse or cruelty. Often, it is born from emotional absence, silent criticism, or a love that felt conditional. Over time, that subtle ache transforms into a set of internal beliefs that whisper, "I'm not good enough," "My needs are a burden," or "I must earn love to deserve it." And without realizing it, these beliefs start to shape how you relate to everything: your boundaries, your self-worth, your relationships, your success. Take the story of Mia, a high-achieving woman who can never rest without guilt. She constantly says yes, even when she's exhausted, seeking validation in every area of her life. On the surface, she's accomplished, but inside, she feels like an imposter. This isn't a personality flaw, it's a survival response. Her mother was present physically, but emotionally distant, only showing affection when Mia performed well. That taught her that love is earned, not given freely. Carl Jung would say that Mia isn't just reacting to her present, it's her unconscious past that's playing out in her present behavior. These soul-level imprints don't start with us. but they live within us until we name them. And if we don't, we pass them down. Because unhealed wounds always find expression, usually in the next generation. That's why the journey of healing the mother wound isn't about assigning blame. It's about reclaiming the parts of ourselves that we abandoned to stay loved. When you finally recognize that what you thought was your personality perfectionism, people-pleasing, emotional numbness was actually a set of coping strategies to survive emotional disconnection, you begin to open a doorway back to your soul. You stop chasing external approval and start offering yourself the unconditional presence you always craved. You stop running from your pain and begin to witness it with compassion. This is what soul-level healing looks like, not fixing yourself, but remembering that you were never broken to begin with. Healing doesn't require your mother's apology or her understanding. It only requires your willingness to see the wound and hold it differently. As you learn to mother yourself, your nervous system softens, your boundaries strengthen, your voice becomes clearer. You are no longer a child waiting to be chosen. You are the adult choosing yourself again and again. And in doing so, you become the one who ends the generational story of silence, shame, and self-abandonment. The wound may not have started with you, but the healing can and must start with you. Because your soul remembers everything, and it's waiting for you to return to the truth that you are already enough, already worthy, already whole. Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on breaking generational patterns and healing the hidden wounds that shape our identity. Your journey to conscious transformation starts here. 3. Attachment patterns stem from early maternal bonds. Attachment theory reveals a powerful truth that the emotional patterns we carry into adulthood are often echoes of the bond we formed with our mother in our earliest days. If that bond was nurturing and stable, it planted the seeds of security, trust, and self-worth. But if it was marked by absence, criticism, unpredictability, or emotional coldness, it left a spiritual wound so deep it shaped how we give and receive love. Many walk through life with anxious attachment, clinging tightly to relationships in fear of abandonment, constantly needing reassurance because deep down, they were never sure love would stay. Others develop avoidant attachment, keeping people at arm's length, building walls instead of bridges, because intimacy feels like a risk they can't afford. And some are caught in a disorganized pattern, simultaneously yearning for connection and fearing it, approaching only to pull away, trapped in a confusing dance of emotional chaos that began in a home where love was both the prize and the punishment. These aren't personality flaws. They're survival strategies, coping mechanisms crafted by a child trying to make sense of a mother's inconsistent signals. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." And in that one sentence lies the heartbreaking reality of the mother's wound. Because so often, we didn't just receive our mother's affection, we inherited her fears, her shame, her silence, her inability to love herself, and her longing to be loved in return. We became the emotional container for her unmet needs, and in the process, many of us lost touch with our own. The spiritual wound is not just about what happened, it's about what didn't happen. It's about the hugs that weren't given, the words that weren't spoken, the safety that wasn't felt, the gaze that never fully saw you. And that absence of nourishment leaves a soul starving for recognition, aching for love, and confused about its worth. This wound seeps into every corner of life. It influences how you choose partners, how you react to feedback, how you set or violate your own boundaries, how you chase success to prove your worth, or sabotage it out of guilt. It whispers in your ear, telling you you're too much when you express your emotions, or not enough when you ask to be seen. But healing this is not about turning against your mother. It's about turning toward yourself with fierce compassion. It's about reparenting the inner child who had to grow up too fast, who never felt fully chosen, and who still believes love must be earned through self-betrayal. Spiritual healing means becoming the mother you never had. It means sitting with your wounds without shame, honoring the pain without becoming it, and finally giving yourself the tenderness you always craved. The moment you begin to see your emotional triggers not as flaws, but as messages from your soul asking to be heard, everything begins to shift. You no longer chase love. You attract it through authenticity. You no longer fear abandonment. You embrace solitude as sacred space. You no longer repeat cycles. You create new patterns rooted in self-trust. The nervous system begins to calm. The need for external validation fades. And slowly, the child within you feels safe enough to rest. Healing the mother's wound is a spiritual awakening. It's the act of remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's peeling back the layers of adaptation to rediscover the soul that has always been whole underneath. And while this journey isn't easy, it is the gateway to freedom. Because once you mother yourself with unconditional love, you stop searching for it in people who cannot give it. You stop trying to fix what someone else broke. You stop confusing love with pain. And in that sacred reclamation, you don't just heal, you transform. 4. The inner mother must be transformed, not the real one. So many of us silently carry a hunger we can't quite name, the aching need for the love, safety, and acceptance that should have come from our mother, but never did. We grow up learning to survive emotional deserts, navigating life with a deep-rooted sense that something essential was missing. But what if the answer isn't found in waiting for your mother to change or finally say the words you've longed to hear? What if the real healing begins when you realize that the transformation doesn't depend on her at all, but on you? Carl Jung taught that within every human being lives an archetype called the Great Mother, a psychic blueprint that shapes how we love, nurture, and relate to the feminine. This inner figure, embedded deep within your soul, is not your literal mother, but the emotional imprint of how you experienced her. If she was critical, absent, cold, or controlling, that distortion becomes internalized, and the voice you now hear inside may not be your own, it might be hers. And so, you don't just inherit her genes, you inherit her emotional patterns, her pain, her silence, and her inability to give what she never received. Healing the mother wound at the soul level means shifting the internalized image of her that still governs your sense of worth. This isn't about blame, it's about liberation. It's about understanding that the mother you needed can now be rebirthed within you through intention, compassion, and spiritual courage. That means gently confronting the inner critic that mimics her voice and replacing it with the voice of the healed mother archetype, the one who is unconditionally loving, endlessly nurturing, and fiercely protective. It means grieving what was missing without shame and choosing to show up for your own needs with presence and power. This process is not linear. One moment you might feel rage, the next, sorrow, then profound clarity. But each step you take toward reshaping that inner bond is a radical act of soul reclamation. You begin to mother yourself in the way you were never mothered, setting boundaries not out of rebellion, but from reverence, speaking to yourself with tenderness instead of punishment, no longer performing for love, but embodying it from within. As you do this, the grip of the old mother's wound begins to loosen, and a new story takes root, one in which you are no longer the child begging to be seen, but the soul awakening to its own divine nurturance. You don't need your actual mother to become someone else. You only need to stop waiting for the love that never came and start becoming the source of it for yourself. Because true freedom is not found in her transformation, it's found in yours. If you're still with us on this healing journey, comment, "I'm transforming within," below. Your reflections help us grow this space for deep emotional and spiritual healing. 5. The persona and shadow are born from the mother complex. To survive childhood, many of us unconsciously shape ourselves into someone we think will be loved. What Carl Jung called the persona, the obedient child, assistant, the helper, the one who doesn't make waves. In doing so, we exile parts of ourselves that felt too messy, too needy, too angry, too emotional into the shadow. Over time, this split creates inner tension, manifesting in adulthood as anxiety, guilt, emotional numbness, or the painful urge to please everyone while quietly losing ourselves. You might feel like you're constantly performing, showing up with a smile even when you're exhausted, or swallowing your truth just to keep the peace. And the saddest part is, you may not even know why, only that something feels hollow. This deep fracture, this internal war, often stems from the mother complex, the emotional pattern we form in response to how love was given or withheld by our mothers. Carl Jung understood that our healing doesn't lie in rejecting the mother or blaming her, but in integrating the parts of ourselves we once had to abandon. One woman I worked with had spent her entire life striving to be perfect wife, perfect employee, perfect daughter, but she was emotionally burnt out and riddled with self-doubt. When we traced her exhaustion to its roots, we found a little girl who learned she could only earn love by being flawless. That child never got to rest, to say no, to just be. The spiritual journey of individuation invites us to go inward, not to fix ourselves, but to reclaim the parts we exiled. It means letting the angry parts speak. It means holding the sorrowful self close. It means asking, "Who am I when I am no longer performing for approval?" It means realizing that the parts of yourself you were taught to suppress were not shameful. They were sacred. As Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Healing the mother's wound is not about confronting your mother. It's about confronting the truth within yourself. It's about creating safety in your own soul for emotions that once felt dangerous. It's about knowing you are not ungrateful for telling the truth. You are not dramatic for feeling deeply. You are not weak for wanting to be loved without conditions. The mother's wound is real, but so is your capacity to heal it. And that healing begins when you stop running from your shadow and start listening to it. So here's what I want you to remember. Your pain is not imaginary. It's inherited, but it's also interruptible. You can still love your mother and acknowledge what hurt. Your shadow is not a flaw. It is a guide. Healing does not require perfection. It requires presence. And wholeness isn't something you achieve. It's something you remember, because your soul was never broken, only buried beneath the masks you wore to survive. 6. Archetypes, like anima and animus, are also distorted. The mother's wound isn't just emotional, it's spiritual, ancestral, and deeply archetypal. Carl Jung's insights into the unconscious remind us that the patterns we carry often begin in silence, in childhood, and get etched into the soul. Men with unresolved mother wounds often find themselves drawn to emotionally distant or controlling partners, not because they want to suffer, but because their psyche is trying to recreate the pain of not being nurtured, in the secret hope that this time it might finally lead to healing. It's not weakness, it's a spiritual reenactment of an unmet need, a subconscious longing to be chosen and seen by the feminine energy that once felt cold or unavailable. For women, the mother wound doesn't always show up in relationships with others. It often turns inward, becoming a harsh, punishing inner voice. This is the distorted animus, the masculine archetype within, which instead of protecting and guiding, becomes a critic demanding perfection, productivity, and relentless self-discipline. It's the voice that tells her she is never enough, never doing enough, never lovable unless she's achieving. These distorted archetypes, anima and animus, are not random flaws. They are spiritual symptoms of generational pain and emotional inheritance. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what the mother wound does. It hides in the shadows, replaying itself in failed relationships, burnout, anxiety, and self-sabotage, all while whispering that this is just how life is. But it isn't. This is not fate. It's a wound, and wounds can heal. To begin the journey is to stop blaming and start becoming aware, not of what she did or didn't do, but of the parts of you that formed in response to it. Healing is not about rewriting your childhood or confronting your mother. It's about rewriting the voice in your head, the rules in your nervous system, the beliefs in your soul. It's about recognizing that your inner critic may not be you. It may be her voice, her fear, her wound echoing through your being. And once you see that, you begin to reclaim yourself. The spiritual path back to wholeness begins when you stop seeing your pain as a burden and begin to see it as a teacher. That ache you feel in your chest, that's not drama or weakness. That's your soul asking to be heard. That's your sacred self calling you back. Healing the mother wound is a soul-level awakening. It's learning to mother yourself in the way you were never mothered, to create a home within your own heart, to stop performing and start receiving. And when you do, you don't just heal, you liberate. You break the cycle not only for yourself, but for every generation that comes after you. Now, take a deep breath, soften your body, and bring awareness to the voices within. Are they truly yours, or echoes of a wounded past? If this message speaks to your soul, comment, "I'm reclaiming my inner voice," below, and let the healing begin. 7. Healing involves awareness, release, and reparenting. There is a kind of grief that doesn't always scream. It simmers beneath perfectionism, people-pleasing, emotional detachment, or an aching loneliness that even love can't quite soothe. This grief, rooted in the absence or distortion of maternal love, leaves behind a soul-level wound that silently shapes how you trust, how you relate, how you speak to yourself when no one's listening. It's not always born from obvious abuse. Sometimes it's the cold tone, the missed eye contact, the love that came with conditions, or the constant message that your emotions were too much. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." And when your mother never healed her pain, you were often handed the weight of it. But healing does not begin with blame. It begins with awareness. The moment you name what was missing, what hurt, what shaped your identity in silence. This awareness cracks the illusion that your childhood was fine just because your physical needs were met, and it gives you permission to stop normalizing emotional starvation. Once awareness takes root, the next step is release learning to let go of the buried rage, grief, and longing in a way that honors the child you were and the adult you are becoming. Tools like letter writing allow you to say what was never safe to speak. Inner child dialogues give voice to parts of you frozen in time. The empty chair method lets you express what your younger self needed to scream. Visualization helps you see yourself holding that child with the tenderness no one else could give. These aren't just techniques. They are sacred encounters with the soul, where you finally make contact with the pain that has been living inside you for decades. And then comes the reparenting, not as a concept, but as a daily spiritual practice. You become the mother you always needed, patient, present, warm, and strong. You start speaking to yourself in ways that soothe instead of shame, and you begin offering your inner child what she was once denied: comfort, safety, joy, and permission to be messy, loud, or sad without punishment. This is the essence of soul work, to rebuild the inner scaffolding from which you live, so that your choices are no longer shaped by old wounds, but by deep self-trust. Jungian therapy supports this beautifully, helping you recognize the inner archetypes that have ruled your life: the inner critic, the abandoned child, the hero, the shadow, and slowly transform them into allies rather than saboteurs. As the internal landscape shifts, your external life changes too. You stop needing others to validate you because you've become your own emotional home. You stop chasing love and start attracting it from a place of sovereignty. You stop apologizing for your existence and start living from your soul. The mother wound no longer owns your narrative. It becomes the very soil from which your healing grows. 8. You can break the cycle and reclaim wholeness. You can break the cycle and reclaim your wholeness, not through blame or resentment, but by stepping into the quiet power of awareness, presence, and emotional responsibility. Healing is not about fixing the past or waiting for apologies that may never come. It's about no longer abandoning yourself in the ways others once did. As Carl Jung said, "He who looks inside awakens." And when you dare to look inward with honesty instead of shame, you begin to understand that your pain was never proof of your failure, but a call to awaken. Maybe you grew up in a home where love was conditional, where emotional neglect or constant criticism taught you that you had to earn affection. That silence was safer than honesty. That pain doesn't disappear just because you grow older. It hides in your relationships, your fears, your self-talk. One woman, outwardly thriving with a beautiful family and successful business, confessed that every achievement still left her empty. She wasn't chasing goals. She was chasing the mother who never truly saw her. Her healing didn't begin with confrontation. It began when she allowed herself to grieve, not just the mother she had, but the nurturing she never received. That moment of truth broke the trance of generational pain. Because healing at the soul level begins when you stop running and start feeling, when you stop waiting for someone else to validate your wounds and begin holding your inner child in compassion. Carl Jung warned that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives and we will call it fate. And so, every time you catch yourself repeating an old pattern of shutting down, self-sabotaging, criticizing yourself in your mother's voice, and choose something different, you are rewriting fate. Not with perfection, but with presence. You don't need to be flawless to heal. You need honesty. You need the courage to stay present when your triggers flare up. You need the humility to forgive your parents without excusing their harm, and the strength to reparent yourself in ways they never could. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the shame, before the conditioning, before you learned to hide your light to feel safe. It's about recognizing that you are not your mother's silence, her rejection, or her wounds. You are the one who stops the cycle by choosing self-love over self-abandonment, truth over performance, and soul alignment over survival. The value of this journey lies not in becoming perfect, but in becoming whole, one choice, one breath, one honest moment at a time. If this message spoke to a part of you that's ready to break the cycle and return to your true self, I'd love to hear how you're choosing presence and emotional responsibility in your own journey. Drop a comment below and share your story. Or if this resonates deeply, simply type, "I choose wholeness," to affirm your path forward. Thank you for joining us on this soul-level journey into healing the mother wound. Remember, acknowledging your pain is not weakness. It's the first act of courage on the path to wholeness. As Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If this message resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who may need it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more transformative insights. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos, each one designed to guide you deeper into your healing and spiritual awakening. Your journey matters, your soul matters, and you are never alone.